President Trump and Joe Biden will walk onto that presidential debate stage for the first time this evening in, obviously, an election year like no other. Voters will get their first chance to compare the two candidates side by side on their policies and personality. Although this is not high school, so it's not about the personality. It's about the policy. It's a debate that carries different risks for both Trump and Biden with just 35 days left until the November election. The president and his Democratic rival are set to square off on multiple issues, including the coronavirus pandemic, the Supreme Court, and the recent revelations about the president's tax return. So for more on this, let us bring in Ed O'Keefe, who is on site in Cleveland, Ohio. Ed, so I wanted to ask you yesterday, we got cut off because we had so much news to get to, how the candidates have been preparing and what are their strategies. It's fascinating to me that you've heard over the last couple of days the president's surrogate saying that his preparation for the debate is every day just being president of the United States, because let me tell you, there are a couple of people who probably disagree with that, like former President George W. Bush, for example, or former President George H.W. Bush.
Or former President Barack Obama, who all struggled in their first debates because they thought they had what it took, and then they realized they didn't. By the way, you said it's coffee day, so I have my coffee, but since it's debate day, I got my popcorn, too. We're ready for tonight.
Oh, yes.
There you go. As for the preparations, we know that Joe Biden has basically been off the trail since last Thursday, preparing from his home in Delaware with aides either in person or virtually. One of his top campaign attorneys, Bob Bauer, the former White House general counsel, has been playing the role of the president, not necessarily dressing up for the role, but certainly, we're told, trying to sort of emulate where the president might go tonight. As for the president, as you said, yes, his team insists that every day is debate prep day because he is president, dealing with a hostile news media, out and about discussing the issues, and generally just preparing himself. But we do know that over the course of the last few days, at least occasionally, while traveling the country to his campaign rallies on Air Force One, he has been holding some jam sessions with aides who bring flashcards. They show him old video of Biden in debates. And the Trump team points out, look, Biden's pretty good at this. He held 11 debates over the past year, cleared a field of 24 other opponents. He knows what he's doing, and they have a point. Biden certainly has done this a lot. The president, of course, hasn't been on a debate stage since 2016 when he faced Hillary Rodham Clinton. We will see how he does tonight. The Trump team also points out one other thing. They like to egg Biden with this. The president, at least, has sat with the moderator, Chris Wallace, recently for a tough interview. Biden has not.
That is a good point. But you brought up something else that, often presidents who are up for re-election think they have the debate in the bag, but now they have to defend the past 4 years of decision making, which they didn't have to do probably during the first rounds of debates that they did. And so now we have the president on the defensive. We've seen him before on the defensive, and he's a counterpuncher. Even, he and his people say that is the case. But when we think about all the ways in which he's going to have to defend himself, how do you see the conversation playing out tonight on the debate stage?
We'll see. They have 6 topics of discussion: the Supreme Court, the pandemic, the economy, race and violence in this country, and the reckoning that is ongoing, the Biden and Trump records, and the integrity of the election. So they have a lot of ground to cover, conceivably, in 6 15-minute chunks. But we know, and we've seen, that the president has a tendency to throw some really hard punches and perhaps deviate from the rules and the format a little bit. We'll see how Biden has prepared himself for that, and whether Chris Wallace, the moderator, steps in to try to get them back on path. But the incumbent struggling in the first debate is a real thing. Ronald Reagan had this issue back in 1984 and caused real concerns about whether he was up to take on Walter Mondale. Came back and clubbed him, won 49 states. George W. Bush, same problem in 2004 with John Kerry. Barack Obama walked off stage after his first debate with Mitt Romney in 2012 and admitted he didn't do as well as he should have. So there's a real potential for the president, potentially, to have a similar problem. But, he also has a tendency to rise to the occasion, especially when it's a big TV moment. States of the Union, there's always been concern. What's he going to do? What's he going to say? How's it going to go? And it ends up being a pretty conventional delivery. This is a big debate. He understands the stakes better than most, and we'll see exactly what he decides to do. The one area that we've got some sense could potentially be a topic of conversation that the president raises, at least, is the subject of Hunter Biden, the vice president's son, the work he did in China and Ukraine, as a board member of an energy company, as an attorney, the millions of dollars that were generated through all that. Biden campaign turns around and says, if that's where the president wants to go, with unfounded accusations, even according to a GOP congressional report, fine, he's ignoring the plight of millions of Americans who are currently sick or unemployed because of the pandemic that he's struggling to oversee. Trump campaign turns around and says, no, it is fair game, because if his son was out doing these kinds of things and the former vice president knew or didn't know about it, it speaks to his judgment, potentially, as commander-in-chief.
The question, of course, Ed, becomes, will this move the needle for people who are firmly entrenched in their camps? And the other question, I guess, as you know, the president has repeatedly attacked Joe Biden for not being mentally or physically fit enough to be president of the United States. We were talking about this earlier in our editorial meeting. It strikes me that, as you pointed out, Ed, the vice president is an experienced debater. He lasted through the entire primary season, where many of the points that the president and his surrogates have made were sort of injected into the primary debate narrative, and he survived that. The question becomes, of course, if the vice president, you said earlier this morning on CBS This Morning, this is an unvarnished look at these two candidates without the echo chamber or the bubble of selective editing or selective clipping. Because the Trump campaign has set these expectations, if Biden goes out and performs the same way he has performed in the last 30 years of debates that he's done, then what?
Then you know, he may be able to pull away with it in certain battleground states. There's another poll out this morning from Pennsylvania, a state he desperately wants to claw back from Republicans, where he is leading the president. That is, you know, the second one in several days that shows him with a single-digit lead. But you know, he has a bad night, and some of those narrow leads that he has in places like North Carolina or Georgia or Arizona or Florida could evaporate. You know, Democrats especially get quite nervous around events like this. Sort of a quadrennial issue for them, that they get very nervous about, you know, can their candidate prevail? And certainly, given what happened 4 years ago, they're quite sensitive to any potential misstep or problem that could suddenly arise and knock Biden off his stride. So, you know, it is something that they've thought about, the Biden campaign, trying to keep him focused on what they believe has been working for him and what polls show is working for him. And that is a relentless focus on raising doubts about the president's leadership of the coronavirus and the economic downturn it's created. And if he can do that, essentially go noun verse coronavirus, noun verse, you know, economic recession, and just keep bringing that up, noun verb, not noun verse. I need more of this. You know, then it could work, and the vice president could walk out of here the winner tonight.
I want to sort of bring up what Vlad kind of folded into his previous question, which was about whether or not this could move the needle. Typically, the first presidential debate gets the highest viewership. You know, yesterday when we spoke to you, I think you said sort of 9 out of 10 voters have already determined who they're going to vote for. And so then I guess the question is, you know, what is the likely impact of this debate, if anything at all? Maybe it's just about entertainment, or could somebody, you know, could a poor showing be more damaging than a good showing be in terms of having a positive result?
Yeah, I think at this point, both of them are in the do no harm stage of this debate, of this cycle, given that things are so close, and you know, very little disruption could conceivably cause problems there. So, you know, there is a small percentage of people who could very well be tuning in tonight and say, you know, something said, something done is enough to tip the scales. Typically, historically, we know that you can basically walk away from any debate and you may only remember one moment, something that was done, something that was said. Whether that had an adverse effect on either of the candidates remains to be seen. But in this viral age, there are undoubtedly going to be 1 or 2 moments here that stick out and may very well throw this election either way.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much, sir.